Hello everyone, and welcome to another special bonus episode of Silver Streams, the weekly podcast from the AFI Silver Theatre and Cultural Centre's programming team. I'm Abbie Algar, Associate Film Programmer, and this week my co-hosts Todd and Ben are taking a week away from the pod, so I'm here on my own to welcome you and to say thanks as always for tuning in. Now, for this special bonus episode of the podcast, we will be featuring a conversation that I had with Lithuanian-American writer and director Tomas Vengris, who, by the way, was actually raised right here in the DC area, about his debut feature, Motherland, which we recorded in December 2020 as part of the AFI EU Film Showcase. And just a couple of weeks ago, we featured a conversation that Ben had with Lithuanian writer and director Jurgis Matulevicius about his debut feature, Isaac, also featured in the EU Showcase. And that was done to mark Lithuania's State Restoration Day on February 16th. And so this week, we thought we'd revisit my conversation with Tomas just in time for Lithuania's other National Independence Day, Independence Restoration Day, which was celebrated on March 11th. So yesterday, if you're listening to the pod the day it drops. Before we get to that, I want to briefly run down all of the excellent films opening this week in our virtual screening room. As always, you can find info on everything we currently have available at afi.com/silver. So new this week, we have The People versus Agent Orange, a documentary about two courageous women, one American, one Vietnamese, who are leading a worldwide movement to stop the use of toxic agricultural chemicals and to hold chemical manufacturers accountable for the 40-year cover-up around Agent Orange, which of course was widely used as a chemical weapon during the Vietnam War, but a primary component of which is still used to control weeds in farming and forestry and parks, even on children's playgrounds, right up to this day. So the film tracks the struggle of these two activists after experiencing their own tragic personal losses tied to Agent Orange to stop the use of these chemicals and to expose a decades-long industrial cover-up. We also have The Good Traitor, a Danish drama about the heroic actions of Henrik Kaufmann, Denmark's ambassador to the US during World War II, as he refuses to follow German directives after Denmark is invaded by Nazi Germany, and he engineers a rebellious plan to defeat Hitler and give the Danish people their freedom back. We have Concrete Plans, which is the debut feature of British filmmaker Will Jewell. And this one's a Coen Brothers-inspired, horror-tinged neo-noir set in the rugged Welsh mountains about a disparate crew of builders who turn on their wealthy employers when they refuse to pay them what they're owed. And lastly, we have the documentary Lost Course. And this is a film from first-time documentarian Jill Lee, who embedded herself in the village of Wukan in southern China for several years, starting in 2011, and bore witness to this unprecedented experiment in local democracy after corrupt officials had illegally sold villagers' land, and the villagers decided to fight back. And this one won the Best Documentary Prize at the 2020 Golden Horse Film Festival in Taipei. So, as I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure of chatting with director Tomas Vengris about his debut feature Motherland as part of last year's AFI EU Film Showcase. The film is set in Lithuania in the early 1990s, shortly after the fall of the USSR, as 12-year-old Kovas travels from the US, where he's been raised, to his mother's homeland, Lithuania, for the first time, as his mother is attempting to reclaim her beloved family estate, which was lost 20 years ago when she had escaped Soviet-occupied Lithuania. So Tomas and I talked about everything from 90s Lithuanian pop music and underage driving to the experience of shifting between two cultures and two homelands. This film is still making its way around the virtual festival circuit, so keep an eye out for it if you didn't get a chance to see it in the EU Film Showcase. And even if you haven't seen the film, it's a pretty fun conversation, and I think we managed to keep it fairly spoiler-free. So please sit back and enjoy our conversation about Motherland. Hi, my name's Abbie Algar, and I'm the Associate Film Programmer here at the AFI Silver Theatre in Silver Spring, Maryland, the home of the AFI European Union Film Showcase. Thank you all for joining us for this year's AFI European Union Film Showcase and for watching Motherland. And now we're really delighted to be joined by the writer and director of the film, Tomas Vengris. Tomas is a Lithuanian-American filmmaker who grew up right here in Washington, D.C. He got his BA from Columbia. He completed his MFA in directing at our very own American Film Institute. Tomas has worked as an editor for several internationally acclaimed directors, including Terrence Malick, Kelly Reichardt, and Lena Dunham. His short films as director include California, which was a national finalist in the Student Academy Awards in 2013, and also Squirrel, which premiered at the 2015 Berlin International Film Festival. Motherland is Tomas's feature directorial debut. It had its international premiere at the Busan International Film Festival last year, and it screened at many festivals across the world, including at the Tallinn Black Nights Film Festival, where it won the prize for Best Baltic Film last year. So, Tomas, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on this incredible feature debut, and thank you for sharing it with us as part of this showcase.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you.
Oh, thank you. So I'll just dive right in with the lead character in the film, who is a young Lithuanian-American boy, Kovas, who's visiting his homeland or his motherland for the first time. And I have to assume that for you, as a Lithuanian-American yourself, that this film has very personal resonance. So I just wanted to ask you about that and about where the idea for this story came from.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's hard to avoid the direct connections there. Of course, the film is very much. I very much leaned on my perspective, having been raised in the U.S. and seeing post-Soviet Lithuania through that American lens. Of course, the story is quite fictional. My first time in Lithuania, I was maybe 7 years old, so. My very first memories are a bit more murky, and I continued to go every summer. So by the time I was Kovas's age, I was well versed in the ways of the post-Soviet Lithuania. But even in initially putting the story together, I did kind of go back through some of the sort of key memories that I had. And I spoke to my family and I spoke to friends and both in Lithuania and in the US who were a little older and remembered those first years. And I kind of, it became a bit of an amalgamation of different stories, but most of the story points in the film were experienced by someone, whether it was me or not, and quite a few were quite personal. The idea of the film, I hadn't really. When I had like the short Squirrel that you mentioned, I played in Berlin and I met the Lithuanian producers, and they had really enjoyed Squirrel, and when they realized that I speak the language fluently and I have been going back to Lithuania constantly since I was a child, and I have a sort of base here. They suggested they asked if there was a film that we could, that I was interested in developing in Lithuania. And it hadn't been something I'd thought about until then. And I just sort of figured, what is a story that I can tell better than a homegrown Lithuanian director? And I was speaking to some friends actually in Europe about my first experiences in Lithuania. And it's strange to think back about it now, because now I have such a base here, and now I feel much more part of the Lithuanian community and Lithuanian filmmaking community and everything like that. But I was thinking back to those first trips, and I was telling these stories, particularly about the chewing gum. How I remember bringing my sister and I brought this suitcase of chewing gum to Lithuania, and we didn't really understand why. And we weren't even allowed to have that kind of candy when we were in the States, so it felt extremely unjust. And we handed it out, and we just saw that these Lithuanian kids in the school, in the playground, just went wild for this Western candy. And I was telling this story, and I think that's when, someone sitting at the table was like, that should be your film. And I sort of started digging into the stories, both from my mother's perspective, from my sister's perspective. And then I saw that there's something really, I think there's something really universal there, not just this very specific, it's a very specific time, a very specific place, a little small corner of the world. But I think there is something very universal about going back and trying to find this sort of mythical homeland that maybe doesn't exist anymore. And that's how it kind of all started.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense, because I was relating to the film. It's very, very specific, as you say, but as someone who's lived outside of my homeland for a long time now, I have these same kind of feelings when I go back. Like, I'm an outsider, but at the same time an insider, and I don't quite fit in. And that was captured fantastically, particularly by Kovas's character, and the young actor who plays him, Matthias. Is his name Matthias Levski?
Yeah,
he's fantastic, and he's really the way into the story for us as viewers, which of course, as you mentioned, is his story, but it's also this broader story, this more universal story, and also a story about Lithuania at this time, this kind of critical, crucial, pivotal time. And so, where did you find this young actor? He's fantastic.
Yeah, it was. It's funny. I mean, we were looking for. So my ideal was, I was prepared, if need be, to find an American actor and have them speak very broken Lithuanian. But my ideal, the search was to look for Lithuanian-American kids, and we did a very long search, including in DC, in New York, in LA, through the Lithuanian community in Chicago, and there was a few boys that were really nice, and they had, there were no professional actors to choose from, but my casting director in Lithuania had, when I first mentioned when we first came up with the idea of the films, this was maybe 2 years before we even, any sort of shooting had started, had been in the countryside in Lithuania, and her friend's friend's nephew was in this town from America, and he was too young for the part, but she filmed him anyway. And we started going through, we went through this whole casting process. And I went back to that video she sent me, and about 1.5 years had gone by. And I was like, there's just something about this kid that's super interesting. And it wasn't even an audition. He was just like making faces at her and just being like a silly 10-year-old or 11-year-old. And so then I got in touch, and we did this, and he lives in Manhattan, Kansas. So not exactly, big city, not a lot of opportunities for acting or anything like that. So we did a few Skype calls, and I flew out to Kansas, and he was just fantastic. I mean, we did these little improvisations, and he was just like, naturally, he had never even been in a school play up until then, just zero experience. But yeah, and so convinced his family that this will be a great, fun summer for him. And I guess it's a little funny because I thought he was too young. When I first saw him, I thought he was way too young, and then he had his growth spurt literally like a month before starting to shoot. So even the version I saw of him in Kansas was, he showed up to Lithuania, right where we needed him to be. It worked out well.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I mean, finding someone who speaks Lithuanian and English fluently, and both with an American accent, presumably the Lithuanian he speaks in the film is accented as well. I mean, that could have been a really tough thing to find, but you nailed it, and right place at the right time, and it was meant to be, I guess.
Exactly.
And the rest of the cast is fantastic. Your lead actress is amazing, who plays Victoria, Cobus's mother. And, this is her story as well as his. And she's actually in another of the films that we have in the showcase this year, Isaac. So,
yes. Yes, exactly.
And I understand she's a big star over there. So how did she come on to the project?
She is, she's probably the only Lithuanian actress that is only a film actress. Lithuania has a very developed theater scene, but she works she works mostly in international projects. So, Russian films. She was in the Babylon Berlin show in Germany in a really fantastic part. But we've been struggling to find this to nail down the mother character, and of all people, this makeup artist that I actually know from a Lithuanian makeup artist who was the makeup artist for my student films when I was at the AFI, was in Lithuania, and she was like, I did this film with this wonderful actress. You should get in touch with her, and I did, and she really, there's something really magnetic about her. So right away, I knew that would be a good combination.
And that connection and, the relationship, the mother-son relationship feels really real here. It feels, they got it. It's fantastic. Let me also ask you about the cinematography, which firstly is really gorgeous, and also works really well to frame what's happening from Cobus's perspective. It's this kind of sense he's kind of peering into this world that he doesn't fully understand yet. There's lots of detail, like small close-ups on small details, and he's kind of building this picture of where he is. And there's lots of shots through windows and doors, almost voyeuristic in a way, like he's looking into this place. Can you talk a little bit about that and about your cinematographer?
Sure. Well, so I guess I think you really, you hit the nail on the head. The whole, the concept right from the beginning that I told Audrius, the cinematographer, is I want the camera to feel like it feels to be a little boy, like a boy on the verge of adulthood. So everything we always tried to have something blocking the way. You always had to be looking through something. There's some sort of something blocking you from being in the scene or in the moment. The adults are having their conversation and we're not privy to it. And I think that from basically the whole time, it was the idea was to really make that subjective feel. So even if it wasn't a literal POV shot, we still wanted to have the windowsill or some sort of something blocking the way, just some curtains, something to feel like we're not allowed all the way up into the action. Audrius was an amazing, he was mostly a documentary cinematographer, and that was really helpful because he just also had an eye for detail. So if there was some long light setup happening, or we had, something was taking some time, and he would just turn the camera around and see something. Or even there's a few moments in the film that weren't even part of a scene. The kids would go off and talk about something. There was a lot more footage that didn't make it in, but he'd capture these amazing moments. Even in the apartment, we wanted to get the boy used to Kovas, or Matas is his name, used to being in front of a camera because he'd never been in front of a camera. So we went into the apartment location. It was just me, the cinematographer. We put him in costume, and they'd already dressed the apartment, and we had the Matas just go around looking at things. And because he was already dressed in that era, he was naturally curious. So, when he smells the soap, that was a completely authentic moment because he wasn't sure what that thing was. And so that was also it was great working with Audrius in that way, because he had this documentary sense where we could just have these sort of unexpected, authentic moments where we could just kind of pop Matas into a space and let it play out.
I noticed at one point when they were driving in the car, the camera kind of lingered on the gear stick of the car, which I thought was interesting because I was like, oh yeah, I guess maybe he probably wouldn't have seen a car with a gear stick at this point in his life. So, just small details like that really, really, really worked fantastically. And then other things I loved in the film were the kind of period details and the architectural settings, like the old bumper car ride that they go on. Was that all shot? Was everything shot on location in Lithuania?
Yes. So for that, we had to drive quite a bit to get to that little amusement park, but it's one that's one of the few that has barely changed. We had to repaint everything because they had painted it. So it was all the objects were the same, but they had painted it in these like bright orange and lime green colors. So we had to go back and repaint everything to the original color palette. But everything, so the most difficult on a film of this size and scope, budget wise, is the city. Driving through the city, we had to be very careful because you have not only other cars, you have all these new buildings and glass buildings and skyscrapers and things like that. Well, Lithuanian versions of skyscrapers. So that was tough, but once we got out into the countryside, it was much easier. We had a great production designer, and it was much easier to find things that we could build around, little foundations, and even in certain places, one of those little cabins that we were in, one of the little cottages, there was very little that we had to do inside. It was just move a few things around, take out the microwave, and we were ready to go. So. And
then kind of other period details like the pop songs that are kind of peppered throughout the film, I really love. Are those songs that you knew already, or are they 90s, 80s, 90s Lithuanian pop songs, or did you have to kind of go on a deep dive and find them?
So some of them I knew. They're all period accurate. They would have been playing around that time. They sound 80s, but that's Lithuanian 90s. So a few of the artists I knew, and there was a few artists that I really liked, but it wasn't maybe the right style, or we had a few issues getting the rights to some of the songs. But basically everybody, even like, so Jordana Butkute, who's kind of, when the girl is dancing, Maria's dancing, that's her song in the sort of festival at the end. That's her song as well. She was like a massive superstar then, and she was so nice about it. We told her about the movie, and she's like, use whatever you want. And her music is it's just, to me, it's so evocative of that time period. So yeah, going through and just like making myself these playlists and listening through them when we were doing the edit was a lot of fun. So there was a few new discoveries for me. I'd known most of the artists, and there was a few things we sort of tucked in the backgrounds that that I would really, I was younger, but I remember from my childhood when those songs were a little bit older, I still remember some of the artists, and it was a lot of fun to play with them.
So you got to make a soundtrack or a Spotify playlist for this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll have to. I'll make my Spotify playlist public because it's there. It exists.
And then has the film has been released in Lithuania?
Yes,
it has. Yes. And how was it received there? How did things go?
It went great. It was interesting. I guess the most interesting part about it for me was, or surprising, is this is it's a very sensitive time period, and a lot of people. It was a very difficult time period as well, and because it was this moment, this great patriotic moment in Lithuania, a lot of people want to only remember the beautiful things, the patriotic elements, and of course, the film lightly touches on some of the darker, sort of the more complicated things that were happening, and so the most interesting thing for me and I was warned about this, another director who you've also, Lina Logita, you had one of her films in the past few years, but she warned me about it. She came up to me and she's like, some people are going to really not like this reflection of Lithuania. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is a beautiful reflection of Lithuania. And we had a few Q&As where people in the audience would get in arguments. Where I was just sitting there. There was one when I was with the actor, and there's just people arguing amongst themselves in the theater, where someone's like, it was such a beautiful time, and someone else was saying like, no, people were getting shot in the streets and blowing up cars, and so it's interesting to see that even something where to me it was it's a film about a boy, his relationship with his mother, and the sort of first awkward, clumsy steps of Lithuania into nationhood was, of course, an important element of the background, but to see just that touching on those very historically sensitive moments, what reaction that can elicit was surprising. It was interesting.
And then I'm assuming you've shown it also to Lithuanian-American audiences in the US. I think it was at the New York Baltic Film Festival, right? And how was that? How did that go?
That was very touching, actually. So that was the time where after the screening, several people came up to me, and I mean, this was as intimate of a portrait of their experience as they've probably ever seen on screen in certain cases, because even if they were Latvian or Estonian, you still there was a lot of people from the Baltics that went to see it, and whether they had taken their children back or whether they had gone as children back, but there was a lot of very close connections that it was nice to see. It was nice to see. It was also, I could tell that in certain cases maybe it was a painful experience for some people, which is also not expected, but it was a really nice reaction to see. I'm hoping the DC Lithuanian community will be watching this and seeing seeing it now through your program. Yeah, it's the Lithuanian-American community. It's basically just in New York, because once COVID rolled in, a lot of our US screenings had to either, well, the initial ones were of course canceled, and we've just sort of moved into the virtual space relatively recently.
Well, I hope we are reaching the DC and Maryland and Virginia Lithuanian communities.
Yeah, we'll have to,
I have to
make sure that happens.
Tell your friends. And then what's next for the film in terms of other festivals and next steps?
I guess we're still going through the festival circuit. I'm trying to think what's next. I know that Arte Kino there's the Arte Kino Film Festival that Arte in France does. And so that'll be exciting because it's showing, it's basically going to be showing all over Europe. Anybody in Europe will be able to access it for the month of December, I believe. And it's, however many languages they subtitled it, which is kind of exciting. Wait, I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know when that's announced, actually. I think we'll be fine. I think it's announced in a couple of days. And then I know it's playing in Vietnam or something, but I can't tell you exactly.
You can't keep up. There's too many.
I've been trying to let the film have its own life and not be like a helicopter mom or crazy.
Well, I do hope it gets some chances to be seen on the big screen. I mean, it's fantastic having this virtual festival, but I was telling you just before we started, I got to see it in Berlin in February, just before everything shut down, one of the last film festivals to actually happen in person. And I got to see the film on the big screen, and it is beautiful. It looks gorgeous on the big screen, and it looks gorgeous on the small screen too. But I just let everyone know that.
No, and it's a pity. It is one of those. Even the sound makes everything weird.
Yeah.
For the big screen, for that nice sound system, but hopefully the story holds out.
Yeah, definitely. It absolutely does. Because I've rewatched it on the small screen and was just as engaged and touched by it then. So yeah. And then you're in Vilnius right now in Lithuania. So how are things looking for film production there? Are you working on anything? Is production starting back up?
Yeah, so production is continuing. there's lockdown, restaurants and bars and everything are closed, but shoots are happening. There's obviously a lot of rules, but I have a little two-day shoot coming up on Monday and Tuesday. So, everybody has to have masks and temperature checks and all of that. But the films are still being made, albeit a little slower. And we're developing another film here that we're hoping to shoot in the summer. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing some casting and some prep work for that. And yeah, hopefully things only get better.
Yeah, hopefully. And then hopefully you can visit us here at the Silver in person. And
absolutely, I can't wait.
And see one of your films on the big screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tomas, thank you so much for joining us, for being with us. Congratulations again on this film. I loved it. I'm sure everyone watching did too. And everyone watching the Q&A, just remember the film's available through the end of the festival. So please tell your friends, and also don't forget to vote on the Audience Award. And yeah, Tomas, we really hope that we'll see you in person with your next project.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. As I told you before, I absolutely love this festival. Being from DC, just knowing, it's just a great program that you have, and I'm very excited to be a part of it, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again in person.
I hope so too.
All right.
Bye for now. Well, that wraps it up for this special bonus episode of Silver Streams. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tomas, and that we'll have a chance to welcome him home to DC, maybe with his next project, and have a conversation in person at the Silver at some point in the near future. I certainly had a great time talking with him about his wonderful debut, and was really happy to share the conversation with you all too now. I know we've had a few weeks off from doing a full podcast episode, but Todd, Ben, and I will be returning in full force next week, March 19th, with a brand new episode on which we'll preview all of the week's new virtual screening room titles and also discuss a stone cold classic that's celebrating its 25th anniversary this month. And if you've already guessed what that is, I'm very impressed, but you're still going to have to wait until next week to find out what it is. For full details on all of the titles currently available in our virtual screening room, visit our website at afi.com/silver. And for any feedback or questions, just send us an email at silverinfo@afi.com. You can also get in touch with us or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at AFI Silver Theatre, and on Twitter at AFI Silver. Music for this episode was provided by Blue Dot Sessions. Find more of their work at sessions.blue.